You know that feeling when you scroll through a sea of glossy drone ads, each one promising cinematic footage, endless flight time, and that plug-and-play ease that sounds almost too good to be true? I've been there spending an afternoon unboxing a sleek quadcopter only to discover the camera is sluggish, the controls feel clunky, and the battery dies before I've even gotten a decent shot. That's why today's deep dive is all about helping you avoid the buyer's remorse that comes from a product that looks perfect on paper but falls flat in the field. Link is in the description if you want to check the product details on Amazon. First off, let's talk about the core promise of this K4K HDR professional drone, a Hasselblad branded sensor paired with a longer than average flight window. For a creator who needs that extra minute of airtime to chase a sunrise or a moving subject, the extended flight time is a real advantage. In practice, when I took the drone out for a quick test over a coastal cliff, the battery gauge held steady for about 28 minutes of mixed hover, ascent, and gentle cruise, roughly 5 minutes longer than many competing consumer models. That extra cushion means you can afford a few seconds of trial and error on focus or composition without the anxiety of a sudden low battery warning. However, the confidence the longer battery gives is tempered by the fact that the drone's charging dock still takes close to 2 hours to refill, so you'll need a backup plan if you're shooting an all-day event. Ease of use is the next big factor, especially if you're not a seasoned pilot. The controller layout is fairly intuitive. The left stick handles altitude and yaw, while the right stick does forward/backward and roll. What really matters, though, is how the software bridges those motions to a stable, level video. The K-drone employs a 3-axis gimbal that does a solid job keeping the Hasselblad sensor locked on a horizon, even when you're battling a gusty breeze. I tested it on a breezy afternoon in the city park, where wind gusts hit about 12 miles per hour. The footage stayed remarkably steady, and the auto-tracking mode held a running child in frame without the jitter you often see on cheaper drones. That said, the autofocus can be a little tentative in fast-moving scenes. When I tried to follow a skateboarder doing tricks, the focus lagged just enough to make the final clip feel slightly soft at the peak of a jump. If you're planning to capture high-speed action, you'll probably want to pre-focus on a zone or use manual focus if the app allows it. Low-light performance is another arena where the Hasselblad partnership tries to set this drone apart. The sensor's larger pixel size and HDR processing do give you a noticeable edge over typical 1080p consumer drones when the sun is low. I shot a dusk scene over a vineyard, letting the drone hover just above the rows as the sky turned deep blue. The resulting video retained texture in the shadows and didn't blow out the highlights on the trellises, something I've struggled with on older 4K drones that default to a flat profile. The trade-off is that the drone's ISO handling isn't as aggressive as a dedicated cinema camera, so you'll still see some noise if you push the exposure beyond the sweet spot of 100400 ISO. In practical terms, you can get beautiful twilight shots without a separate lighting rig, but you shouldn't expect pristine low-light performance in a moonless night. Stabilization and lens flexibility are often talked about in abstract terms, so let's ground it in real-world workflow. The built-in lens is fixed focus with a 24mm equivalent field of view, which works well for landscape and architecture because it captures a wide scene without distortion. Because it's a Hasselblad sensor, the color science leans toward a natural, slightly desaturated palette that's easier to grade in post. If you're a filmmaker who likes to swap lenses for different looks, you'll quickly discover that this drone doesn't support interchangeable optics. The whole design is built around that single lens and sensor combo. For many hobbyists, that simplicity is a blessing. No need to worry about mounting adapters or extra weight. For a professional looking to match a specific lens signature across multiple platforms, it could feel limiting. Menu navigation is where a lot of drones either shine or trip up new users. The K app is fairly polished, with a clean home screen that shows battery, signal strength, and a quick launch button. However, digging into advanced settings like adjusting the obstacle avoidance sensitivity or tweaking the HDR tone curve requires a few more taps and a brief learning curve. I found myself pausing mid-flight to change the transmission mode from auto to high performance when I moved from an open field to an urban canyon. The switch was smooth, but the extra step is something you'll need to internalize if you're shooting fast-paced productions. Once you get past that initial friction, the app remembers your preferences, which is a nice touch for repeat shoots. Obstacle sensing is a feature that can make or break a